Nighttime erections are like a really important health marker. Men who do not have nighttime erections are 70% more likely to die prematurely.
This man spends $2 million annually to reverse his age. Meet Bryan Johnson, a tech entrepreneur and biohacker on a mission to achieve the body of an 18-year-old. With a strict regimen of treatments, Bryan is redefining the limits of aging through science.
You're also experimenting things that you're putting inside your body just to test how the functioning of those different parts gets affected.
We reversed my thymus age by 7 years, but to do so, we used a human growth hormone. And so now we had all the best science that humans have ever produced slow down my speed of aging and reverse aging damage.
I would actually love to deep dive into the science of exchanging your blood with another human being.
You put a needle in the arm, and so then it translated into this plasma exchange.
Throughout the body?
Well, yeah, with my son, he just gave me a liter of his plasma, and I gave my dad a liter of plasma.
Will it become affordable for people 10 years later?
It's affordable now.
Is sexuality a factor that's being measured? Any aspect of sexuality?
I was doing this therapy and I was sitting on this device, electromagnetic stimulation. Every time I'd wake up, I was erect. I spoke to my team. I was like, you guys, what is going on? Like, why am I having so many nighttime erections? Actually, women also have nighttime erections.
Do you think masturbating is good for health? I have a theory that emotions play a big role in this whole process.
You're correct. And most people grinding in life believe they have to martyr their health in exchange for success. And it's so strongly held that they basically hold themselves in a prison.
When you hear the first few sentences about Bryan Johnson, you think that that's a very weird story arc. I think in your 201st or 205th year, that's when people will value Bryan.
I am likely to die very soon.
Imagine you spend a majority of your adult life building a company that eventually gets sold for a lot of money, $300 million to be specific, gets deposited into your bank account, but you sacrificed your health, your happiness, your peace in that pursuit of money. That was the point that Bryan Johnson reached during the course of his own life. And post that point, his life has been about a very special purpose. The purpose is what people know as longevity or immortality. Bryan is using his own body as a human experiment. He's experimenting on his own body in order to figure out the mystery called immortality. The way he's doing this, the techniques he's using, it's all scientific, it's all data backed. I don't think I've come across a human who uses science as much as Bryan does in order to chase their life's pursuit this aggressively. This was a conversation that gave me a lot of perspective on what one's life's mission should be. That's what I hope it'll bring to you as well. Of course, if you enjoy the subject of biology, of biohacking, of health in general, of lifestyle-based conversations in general, you're going to enjoy this episode featuring Bryan Johnson. But for those of you who've never come across any of his content, I highly recommend that you watch the entire podcast. You'd be surprised to know that human beings with this kind of a vision exist on the same planet that we exist within. This was a very deep and deeply perspective-building episode of TRS. Enjoy Bryan Johnson on The Ranveer Show. Bryan, it's an honor hosting you on The Ranveer Show.
I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
How are you, brother?
Honestly, excellent.
Yeah?
Yeah.
What's up?
Genuinely, I feel so much excitement for life. And that's not always been the case. You know, like life is tough and we all go through ups and downs. I genuinely feel happy and motivated that the future is going to be great.
I'd not seen your face or read about your story, when I first heard your name on a podcast, and I can't even remember which podcast it was or a conversation. And when you just hear the first few sentences about Bryan Johnson, you think that that's a very weird story arc. And the human brain automatically criticizes that story arc. But it got me curious because of the whole health aspect. And the more content of yours that I downloaded into my own head, the more my respect grew for you. And I think that that's how human society will be discovering you as well. I think that people are going to understand you much more with time. And eventually, and this is so kind of ironic, I don't like saying this, okay? So pardon me if I'm crossing a line with you.
There's no line you can cross. So,
okay. Say if you die at age 200,
yeah.
I think in your 201st or 205th year, that's when people will value Bryan.
Yeah.
Because everyone's valued more after they die.
Yeah.
And I sincerely hope that if your goal is immortality, I hope that you reach there. But I'm sure you're going to try for it. And I'm sure you're going to exceed 100 years for sure. You're going to change something about the human story. You're contributing to science here. But the point where you die, I think after that, people are going to realize what you're doing for human society.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll yes and you.
Yeah.
And I will say that I am likely to die very soon in the most ironic way possible. Likely getting hit by a bus. Like, we know that irony is the ultimate force in society, in the universe. And so if I don't die some kind of ironic death, something's off. And so I'm open to this idea. I'm okay with this idea. I know, if it happens, the internet would love it. Just like bring people so much joy. I'm okay with all of it. And so I really am not attached to the seriousness of this whole thing. Like I definitely have goals and objectives, and internally that I feel so driven to accomplish them. Also, I'm just open to that we live in this gigantic galaxy. There are things I cannot control, and therefore I'd much rather be at peace with it. And so, but to your point that at what point in time does someone's contributions become valued? I do sincerely work for the respect of the 25th century. I really sincerely don't care what people think of me in today, because I'm playing a game that will matter hundreds or even thousands of years into the future. And so I don't expect the respect to be in this moment. I expect it to be for people to reject it. I expect people to be confused. I expect people to misunderstand me. So I agree with you that the endeavor I've chosen will be poorly understood and not respected for some duration of time. Totally agree with you.
Gotcha. In the final cut of this episode, I would have already covered aspects of your story in the trailer as well as the intro for you. But I'd love for you to kind of just recap your own scientific story for the audiences who are meeting you for the first time through this podcast.
Yeah.
So can you explain your story from the point of selling off the company at age 34?
Yeah.
And if you're comfortable, I'd love for you to talk about how much money you made by selling the company off and how that money felt.
Yeah. I remember the day I made roughly 300 million from the sale of my company, Braintree Venmo. And I remember when it hit my bank account and I logged on and I saw the number and it was just surreal. My two boys were with me and I said, boys, come over here. I need to show you something. And I said, do you see that number? That's how much money we have right now. And they said, well, Dad, what does that mean? And I said, well, okay, for like your allowance, you get $1 a week or whatever it was. And, we have, 300 million of these. And so they're like, what can we do? Can we buy a car and can we buy, and it was this conversation where I knew the sale was coming. I knew we were going to make money. I knew the impact to my children was going to be significant, more so than I could understand. And there were two ways to think about this. One is I read that parents sometimes hide their wealth from the kids, especially young kids. And when the kids get to a certain age, it's like, surprise, The parents are very rich. And then other parents are much more transparent about it. And so I chose the transparency path. And I said, we now have a lot of money, and here is how we're going to behave as a family with this amount of money. And I just built it into their psyche from the first day. Like, we're still going to be frugal as a family. We're not going to buy lavish things. Like, we're not going to spend in a silly way. But I turned it to a teaching moment with my children. Internally, I was broke, like just broken as a human. I didn't feel anything. I didn't even care we had money. Like, there was nothing I wanted to buy. There was nothing I wanted to do. I was so depressed out of my mind that it just meant nothing to me. And so I had been pursuing this goal for 13, 14 years. And I'd just been beaten down. And now I knew I had this freedom, but I had no objective. I was just like, I was purposeless. I was like adrift at sea. I was biochemically just in the depths of depression. So that moment was very hard. And so like trying to like redirect my hopelessness into my children was like a way for me to escape myself and try to contribute in some way to my kids.
What did that cocktail of sadness and lavish wealth feel like?
I didn't care. Just genuinely did not care.
What did it teach you about life?
The why behind our existence matters so much more than the how. And I didn't have a why.
So when you say the how, you mean the processes, the careers we attach ourselves to, the missions we attach ourselves to. But when you say the why, it's the layer of cake below the spongy layer.
Yeah. It's
right?
like, it's this whole situation is so bizarre. We're conscious beings on this floating rock in space in this gigantic universe. How did this come to be? And what do we do? And that was the omnipresent question in my mind. And I had grown up in a community where it was a very religious community. And they basically said, like, this is reality. Like, you existed before this life. Here's why you're here on this planet, and here's what happens after life, and like here's all the rules, and here's how you understand. Like, basically a rule book that gives you all the answers to life. You don't need to figure anything out. You just need to learn what you've been told. And then when I realized that I didn't believe that was like I had been fed this narrative, then you basically are left with an entire void. You have no understanding of why existence is or what to do about it. And then you become much more aware of, you can say, okay, so I can see like this pocket of people, like this, like capitalism says, like this is a system to make money and become wealthy and buy things and do things and become productive and invent. Then you've got religious frameworks and you have societal frameworks. And so then I could look at it from this objective perspective. What are these systems and what are they offering? Like, how are they depicting reality? And that's when I became consumed by this question of what is the riddle to solve existence? And throughout time, various people have tried to do that. So, I mean, Buddha, right, made the observations like, hey, life is suffering, and therefore we should detach ourselves. And here's the old eightfold path. And then other religious traditions kind of sprung up. Muhammad said, submit to God, and Jesus said, I am the Son of God. Adam Smith was like, hey, there's this invisible hand for markets and capitalism and economics. And Marx was like, no, it's really class warfare. Then America was like, no, we the people. It's like various frameworks have like come up in various societies. And that's not all of them, of course, like more. And I just wondered in 2024, is it possible that a new framework to understand reality would emerge, that none of these things that previously were invented would be equal to this moment? And I became obsessed with that question. Is there something that doesn't exist that should exist that solves the riddle of existence for this moment?
But where did that first seed of this new mission kind of sprout in your head? How did it get placed? Was it a conversation? Was it a story you read? Like, why are you on this path?
It was leaving the community I was born into gave me this detached perspective that we're most things we believe are not things we chose to believe. They're things that we were told to believe. And then I scrutinized everything I could survey in all of society and say, like, do I believe in anything that society says? Like literally anything outside of my body taking breaths every few seconds that it doesn't want to die. Do I think anything in existence is believable? Some things are stable, like physics and math. But outside of that, when you walk into the realm of human narrative, do I believe anything? And what's the reason to believe anything?
Gotcha. So there's a quote that comes up a lot on our show because we do a lot of spiritual episodes. The quote goes something like, everyone has a God, they just call it a different name.
That's right.
So what is your God? Science?
My God is existence.
Existence.
That existence is the highest virtue.
Gotcha. So it's something that the rest of your life's actions are catered towards.
Yes.
Enhancing existence. And the outcome of that is this whole anti-aging game.
Yeah.
Right? When you try kind of giving a practical attachment to the word called existence, we're talking about scientifically reversing aging.
Yes.
Fair to say?
Yes.
Okay. Can we go into a little bit of science at this point?
Let's do it.
Okay. To quote Naval, he talks about how the most complex concepts in the world can be understood much better when you apply first principles thinking on them.
Yeah.
And if that becomes the steel frame of your thought, it's much more powerful than the scaffolding that people use to describe large thoughts. And the scaffolding is usually jargon.
Yes.
So I'd love for you to take the concept of anti-aging and explain it from a very basic level and perhaps a cellular level, because our entire body is just made up of cells.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And if you learn how to take care of that one cell, you're probably working on the building blocks of anti-aging.
Yes.
And I'm assuming that that's the starting point of all these other procedures that you're putting your body and your mind through.
Yes.
Fair to say?
Yes.
So can you explain the ABCs of anti-aging?
Yes. Yeah. Before I do that, just one quick reference point is like, if you look at humanity, let's say that people in the year 7000 are looking at the past 25,000 years, or no, let's say next, like the last million years. And they're just looking at a timeline of intelligence. And they point back to the early 21st century, the time we're living now. And they're just like identifying big things that happened through a time. And it's like, oh, of course, in that, 30 or 40 year window, Homo sapiens figured out they no longer were going to die. So I'm just saying, like, in this moment, like, we can talk about these very granular topics of health and wellness and sleep and diet and exercise, but on a really big time scale, it seems so obvious that in the future, whatever exists, we'll look back and be like, oh yeah, of course, like they died before, and then they figured out how not to die. That easy. And that's the entire thing I'm saying is, if you look at this in the big arc of history, this is the moment as a species where we are transitioning from death being inevitable to being able to extend our lifespans, not to immortality, but just that we can begin extending them at a certain pace where we can say, this is interesting. And if we keep on extending 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, we may be able to live for a very, very, very long time. We're not quite sure how long. And so that's entirely what my endeavor is it's a reimagination of what life is when death is no longer inevitable.
Gotcha. And you're doing that through scientific research as well. You're attaching data points. You're studying your own body every day. You're also bringing out practical guidelines, which is what the blueprint is.
Yes.
Right? And Bryan Johnson's blueprint is evolving with time.
Yes.
You're adding new things to it constantly based on the data and findings from the experimentation that you're doing on your own body.
Exactly right. Yeah.
I'm sorry I'm asking you such direct questions.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
How much money have you spent on this whole research process until this point?
Millions. Yeah.
More than a couple of million?
Yeah. Yeah.
More than 3?
Probably more than 3. Yeah.
Okay. And all of that 3 million was worth it.
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
The reason why it was so expensive is the therapies, the things someone can do to do blueprint are actually very low cost. It was just all the scientific research and the measurement. So what we did is I basically said, okay, like if you think about explorers of old, like Ernest Shackleton or Lewis and Clark or Magellan, like the adventurers, explorers, where they said like, what is the most impossible thing for a human to do in this moment? And I basically said like, what if I don't die? Like, what's that process? And so I hired a team of 30 medical professionals. We went through all the scientific literature, everything's ever been published. We ranked all the evidence on lifespan, health span. So we put it all together. And then we went through a process of we measured every organ in my body and we got a biological age. So I'm chronologically 47, but my heart is 37. My diaphragm is 18. My left ear is 64. So I have hundreds of biological ages. So you can be one age chronologically, but then hundreds of ages throughout your body because your organs age at different rates.
Right.
And so...
And this is probably different for every human, right?
Exactly. So if you measure your brain or your lungs, your pancreas, they're going to have different ages. And so now we had all the best science that humans have ever produced. We have a biological age measurement for everything in my body. And then we said, okay, now we're going to take all the scientific evidence and apply the therapies to my body. Can you both slow down my speed of aging? And 2, can you reverse aging damage? So if I'm 47, or say if my heart is 37, can we make my heart 36? And then can we make it 35? And then 34? And so we basically, for the past 4 years, we've been doing this systematic process where we apply the scientific evidence in the form of therapies to my body. We test the organ age again. We do it again and again. And it's produced in me arguably the best biomarkers in the world. So I'm sure there are others who have better biomarkers than me. They're just not as measured. But of those that are measured, and I'm not saying even 40-year-olds, I'm saying like 18-year-olds across the board. If you look at my measurements, like my speed of aging, for example, is 0.64. It's one of the best in the whole world. Better than my son, who's 19.
What would like an athlete's rate of aging be like?
We'd have to test it because everyone's different.
Okay.
But like roughly means my birthday is every 19 months. And so like, let me clarify the statement about my son. Like when you're 19, like your speed of it, you're still growing, right? So it's probably not like entirely accurate, but I guess I just use a data point of like, it varies according to age. But then if you look at my cardiovascular ability, I'm in the top 1.5% of 18-year-olds. If you look at my optimal fat, muscle, bone mineral density, like just down the line, I'm top 1% optimal across the board. And so it's the first time that anyone in health has taken this highly scientific, data-driven approach, like not funny stories, not weird practices, just simply science and data, and I've published the whole thing. It's been in real time. I've just shared it. All the good, all the bad, things that work, things that don't work, things we fail at, like just been an open project. And so I've shared everything with the world for free.
Okay. I have a surface level question to begin with, and then I want to go into deeper tangential questions related to your process.
Yeah.
The surface level question is something that a lot of listeners and normal people think about. So I think there's a part of the world population that acknowledges what you're doing for humanity. There's a large part that doesn't like what you're doing because you're just breaking the norm. And then there's a part of humanity that's listening very intently to see whether what Bryan Johnson does can become affordable for them 10 years later. Will it become affordable for people 10 years later?
It's affordable now.
Okay.
Yeah. So the good news is that I have done a lot of things that are experimental and that are costly. But to get the majority of the health benefits I've achieved, you don't need to do those things. So it really comes back to the things we already know: sleep, diet, exercise, don't do bad stuff.
Right.
If you can master those, you get the majority of the health benefits. It's just that mastering those that's the hardest part of health.
Gotcha.
But the benefits are there. So getting good sleep, some people can't because they work night shifts. Some people have children. Like there are impediments. But generally speaking, you can make life adjustments to prioritize sleep. So I have a protocol around this, same with exercise and then same with diet. And so these are within reach of people who really have very little money.
Okay. While I can ask you more surface level questions and ask you to break down your sleep routine,
Yeah.
I think you've covered a lot of that in other podcasts as well as your own YouTube channel. So what I will basically ask you is, you're vegan, right?
I am.
Okay. Do you think that if you were eating meat, your rate of aging and all that would be the same?
It's hard to say.
Okay.
I'm vegan for an ethical preference.
Not a health reason.
No, I mean,
Gotcha.
there is some evidence suggesting that plant-based diets offer benefits, but I really, the carnivore versus vegan conversation is warfare.
I agree.
And there's nothing productive that comes from it.
Right.
And so I really take a impartial approach that if somebody eats meat, do you? Great.
Same.
Fine.
Yeah.
So I really want to be very clear. That's not the battlefield I want. That's not what I'm going to die for. So like, just do your thing. The most productive thing is to use data. So right now we talk about these things in abstract, like plants or carnivore, but really the only thing that matters are biomarkers.
Gotcha.
So really we're approaching it at a wrong level.
Okay. What did you study in college?
So I got a business degree.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I studied engineering, like electronic engineering.
Yeah.
And what engineering teaches you is to basically take a problem and break it down into tiny pieces, analyze those pieces individually.
Yeah.
Which is what I assume you've done to a large degree in terms of your own body.
Yes.
You've broken it down into tiny pieces and you're able to measure their functioning and the effects of your lifestyle on their functioning, and you're constantly tracking data.
That's exactly right. Yeah. Right. So I have become the most measured person in human history.
Right.
I'm a collection of 35 trillion cells plus more in my gut. So we've tried to quantify as many as the 35 trillion cells as possible. It's like what is happening and what happens when you do this therapy or when you sleep well, when you exercise. So yeah, we've really tried to robustly capture all those interactions.
But you're also experimenting a bit with things that you're putting inside your body just to test how the functioning of those different parts gets affected.
Yes.
Right? And I'm also assuming that applies to your exercise protocols and your lifestyle protocols in general.
All of it.
Has there been anything that you've done through your experimentation phase that's harmed your body in any way?
I think so. Yeah. We were working on a thymus rejuvenation protocol. So the thymus is the organ just behind the sternum. It's responsible for your immune system. And so we were trying to reverse the age, which we did successfully. We reversed my thymus age by 7 years. It's a big deal. But to do so, we used human growth hormone. And so I did it for 100 days. And I started having symptoms of intracranial pressure as a side effect. And my blood glucose also went off for a bit. So I stopped it. And my body took some time to recover. But so it wasn't a serious side effect. It was just short-term side effects. But still, I don't think we would do human growth hormone again for that therapy.
Right. We had Fab on the show a few days ago, and he spoke about how people who openly speak about the biohacking are sometimes criticized by people who doubt the side effects of the process of biohacking. But I've spoken to lots of medical professionals on the show. I've spoken to lifestyle professionals. I've spoken to biohackers like yourself. And I feel like a biohacker is very, very, very careful about what they're doing with their bodies, because that's the basis of the mission, that you want to be the GOAT of health.
Yes.
Right?
Exactly.
This is what you spoke about using the HGH. That was the closest you've come to sort of like harming your body.
Yes.
Right? And then you must have stopped it the moment you would have done it.
That's right.
Okay. You've also done blood transfusions.
Yes.
I think you've done a blood transfusion with your son as well. This is one of the first things that we heard about in India. It was actually a fan of yours, a friend of mine, Dhairya Chheda. He spoke about this. He said that Bryan exchanged blood with his son. And my response was that, okay, but the son has a younger body, so maybe it filtered the blood more easily. And then the younger blood in Bryan did its job in terms of youth. Is that the raw version of the science?
Basically, yeah. That
Right?
the initial science was a old rat and a young rat were sewn together. So they actually shared a circulatory system, and the old rat became younger. So they're trying to tease apart what is the phenomena that happened here to make that happen. So yeah, and so then it translated into this plasma exchange.
Plasma exchange.
Yeah, but yeah, exactly.
Gotcha. Throughout the body?
So yeah, I mean they were sharing a circulatory system, whereas with my son, he just gave me a liter of his plasma, and I gave my dad a liter of plasma.
You gave your dad a liter of plasma?
Yeah, that's how this whole thing happened. So
okay, can you take us through this whole process of blood transfusion? And I ask you this because on the internet, when you say the word blood transfusion, people automatically associate it with the Illuminati.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So I'm sure that accusation has been thrown on you.
Yeah.
But I would actually love to deep dive into the science of exchanging your blood with another human being.
So I mean, as president of the Illuminati, this is what I did. Yeah.
Okay.
So my dad called me one day and he said, Brian, I'm in a panic. I just wrote something for work. I stepped away from my desk. I came back and I saw it's a jumbled mess. I'm experiencing cognitive decline and I didn't see it. So he felt terrified. He's losing his mind. And so he said, is there anything you have that is being shown to be promising for mental acuity? I said, funny, Dad. Actually, the team and I were just talking today about these plasma transfusions. So we had done some research. We had seen that there were a few studies for people that were using it for Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. So I said to my dad, like, Dad, if you're interested, I would be more than willing to give you a liter of my plasma. I don't know if it's going to work. The evidence is pretty, shallow, like may or may not, but like, if you're down, I'm happy to do it. And he said, I'm in, like anything to keep my mind. And so my son overheard the conversation. He's like, I'm in too. And so I was like, okay, cool. This is like a tri-generational plasma exchange. Let's do it. So the three of us got together. And so first my son had a liter of plasma removed. So basically you put a needle in the arm, blood is taken out, and then there's a centrifuge, they spin it, and it separates the blood from the plasma. So blood red, plasma yellow. Then the blood is put back into the body and the plasma is kept apart. And so there's a few cycles and you get a full liter of plasma.
Gotcha.
And so then he completed that. Then I went next. I had a liter of my plasma taken out. And then when my liter was taken out, his liter came into me. And then my dad went last and he had a liter taken out of his and he put my liter into him. And so we were measuring, for example, one measurement we did was speed of aging. This is used on DNA methylation. So a clock inside the body showing how fast you age. So when my father did this, he was aging at roughly a 71-year-old pace. So expected, that's his age. After the plasma exchange, his speed of aging reduced by 25 years. So he was aging at the speed of a 45-year-old, which makes sense because my speed of aging, right, is equivalent to like, it's one of the best in the world. It's 0.64. So he basically, it cut him down in half and that stayed for 6 months. And so it was really remarkable that it had such a meaningful impact on his speed of aging. Whereas with me, I saw no change. And it's probably because my biomarkers are basically identical to my son's. So there's very little difference between his biological health and mine. And so it makes sense. Whereas my dad is like not in as good a condition. So he would felt this big boost. So
Gotcha.
Yeah, so it was actually extremely successful, more successful than I thought it would be.
Gotcha. And you were measuring all your dad's markers as well through this?
Yes.
And for your son, it's as simple as donating blood,
Yes.
right? He said just donate a liter of blood and then they separate the plasma.
Exactly right.
Was it painful when they were injecting plasma into you?
No.
It just feels like an injection.
Just like getting a blood draw. Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. I'm sure you asked your dad this question and I kind of want to relay the same question to you. Did you feel any different with that fresh plasma or do you feel just the same?
Same.
And what about your father?
He reports it was life-changing. He reports he felt better energy, better mental clarity. He said that his coworkers were like, what is going on? Like, you're just different. So it was life-changing for him.
Kind of like having a long-term caffeine shot or something?
Yeah, he just, he wants to do it again. Yeah, I mean, it was, I can imagine being him. Like, he was telling me at 71, like, I guess like neither you nor I are probably aware of how hard it is to be 72 years old. Like where you're hearing is less robust. Your eyesight is less robust. When you walk downstairs, you can't be like working on your phone or doing different things. You have to like focus on each step so you don't fall. So the boost he felt was just life-changing. Whereas you and I just kind of take these things for granted that we're just healthy and we feel great. We don't have to think about our health at all.
But you felt no difference from the plasma transfusion?
No, and no change in my biomarkers.
Is there like one activity you'd pick out as being the most impactful other than sleep? Sleep is your ultimate, right?
Yeah, sleep is the most powerful drug that anyone can take. The next is probably exercise. And the next is diet. Those three things in order.
Okay. When you say exercise, you're not just talking about strength training, right?
Yeah, it's strength and cardio and mobility. Yeah, but like for anyone who's not doing something today, it doesn't need to be complex. Just 30 minutes of activity is better than zero. So yeah, I do a lot of much more involved exercises, but it doesn't need to be complex.
Okay. And is your exercise protocol also evolving with time?
Yes.
How do you bring in new elements to it?
Just this past week, we published a brand new protocol. So we learn something new every week. Like we're always changing. So like in any given day, we change something. It's just constantly evolving. And so like with this plasma thing, most people would try to hide failures, but we just openly published it. Like, and the headlines would report out like, plasma transfusion fails, Johnson devastated. It's like actually like we're just publicly sharing the data so everyone knows. So but it's always evolving. I keep a protocol page on my website of everything I do from the moment I wake up to the moment I go to bed, and actually and during sleep as well. So everyone has a real-time snapshot of I think we've built the best protocol, the best health protocol in the world. And It's all available for free, updated in real time.
Right. I got to put you in the spot a little bit. It's going to be a slightly difficult question, but you can have a go at it.
All right.
In 5 sentences, can you explain how the average person can get in a good night's sleep?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
Reframe your identity that you are a professional sleeper. Number 2, eat your last meal of the day at least 2 hours before bedtime. And if you can, push it back to 3, 4, 5, 6. Eat earlier and lighter and watch your sleep improve. 3 is monitor your evening light environment. So try to eliminate screens, blue lights, bright house lights. Do a yellowish color. If you can, get red. So light environment. 4, be consistent. So plus or minus, choose your bedtime, whatever your bedtime is, and then be in bed plus or minus 30 minutes. And 5, this is the last one, is have a nighttime routine. So I go to bed at 8:30 p.m. When 7:30 arrives, Sleep Bryan is now on duty. So that means when a thought comes in, like, oh, but you forgot blank, or I have a good idea about blank, I say, thank you, ambitious Bryan. We appreciate you and we see you. We have all day tomorrow to take care of this wonderful thing. Right now, we are in sleep mode. So for that hour, go for a walk, do a breath work, meditate, read a book. But you need an hour to calm your body down and say, we are going to sleep. Otherwise, you ruminate all night long on your thoughts, your worries, your excitement. Do those 5 things and you can master sleep.
Can I ask you the same version of an explanation for diets? So in 5 sentences, could you explain to me what an anti-aging diet looks like?
Lentils, vegetables, berries, nuts, seeds, extra virgin olive oil. Avoid sugar, processed foods, fried foods, additives, and ingredients which you can't read the words.
Okay, that's it?
That's it.
Okay, how about how many times you should eat in a day?
Each person is different. I eat all my food within a 6-hour window. My last meal of the day is 11 a.m. So I fast all the way up until bedtime. So I like 6 eating and 18 fast, but each person's different. I find that is most conducive to the best high quality sleep.
Gotcha. And water intake?
I do about 3 liters a day, and I discontinue drinking fluids at around 4 p.m. And that way I don't get up at night to go to the bathroom.
Gotcha. And protein shakes. We got to talk about protein shakes.
Yeah.
What's your opinion?
Yeah, so I consume 120 grams of protein per day, thereabouts. And that is enough for me to be top 1% optimal in muscle mass and cardiovascular ability and metabolic health. It is very common to think you need 150, 200, 250. It's not required. So I've demonstrated that you can be reasonable on the protein intake, have optimal biomarkers across the board. If like my son consumes more protein than that because he's trying to bulk up and he's also 19. So there are exceptions to this, but generally speaking, a lot of people overconsume protein.
Can we break down this protein situation a little more? You're vegan.
I am.
It's an assumption that one can't get the protein requirements hit through a vegan diet.
Yeah.
I'd assume that you argue against that point.
Yeah. So I am vegan. I do caloric restriction, which means I consume less than the recommended daily allowance. I consume 2,250 calories a day. I exercise for 1 hour a day, and I have a low protein intake, according to cultural norms of 120, 130. And so most people say with that profile, I would be weak. I would be not able to compete athletically. But actually, my muscle and body fat are top 1% optimal, and my cardiovascular ability, top 1.5% of 18-year-olds. So my biomarkers say it's top 1% optimal. So it's an example that I've defied all cultural norms, and I'm still a top performer.
Gotcha. I don't think there's anyone more qualified to speak about protein intake-based requirements or food-based requirements than you because of your daily experimentation and your daily download of data from your own body. Can you break down some of the vegan protein sources that are your go-tos?
Yeah. Yep. So I'll caveat and say, of course, like the advice varies according to male, female. It varies according to age. So these are just general approximations. But what I meant to say is like we follow science and we follow data.
Right.
And so what I'm trying to say is don't follow cultural norms, follow the data. So get yourself measured. But yeah, I get my protein sources from lentils, from pea protein, hemp protein. Those are primarily the major ones.
Gotcha. Lentils, pea proteins, and hemp proteins.
Yeah.
So you do a couple of protein shakes every day?
I have, 2 a day.
2 a day.
Yeah.
And the rest is from lentils.
Yeah.
So this is chickpeas, black lentils.
I'll do some beans.
Beans.
Yeah.
This is primarily what we eat in India.
Yeah.
Because we have mostly a vegetarian population.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe this is a slightly biased question, but Indians currently are in this phase of Indianness where we're starting to rediscover our own culture.
Yeah.
And there's a bit of a historical context. Basically, when Europeans were ruling over our land, it's said that they stripped us of our ancient culture, which was also very advanced. So we're rediscovering yoga. Have you heard of Ayurveda?
Yes.
So we're rediscovering Ayurveda, we're rediscovering pranayam and all these practice, meditation, obviously. Yeah. The thing is, okay, here's what the narrative is in India, right? We feel like people in America and Europe value our culture more than most Indians. And you'll see a lot of Indians today dissing all these concepts like Ayurveda, yoga, meditation, pranayam, because there isn't enough scientific evidence to back every single aspect of these subjects. But my take on this phenomenon is that there needs to be more scientific research done in order to understand the impact of these subjects on the human body and the human life.
Yeah.
At the start of the podcast, I said that I respect you because you took your money and you put it against a purpose. The day I feel like I'm done with making money and I have more money than I know what to do with, I'd actually fuel scientific research in these domains for the sake of my own culture, which is why I find what you're doing extremely fascinating. Can we speak about these Indian concepts a little bit? And please, if you disagree with what I'm saying, I'm very open. I'm completely open to like understanding your perspective.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that the criticism is coming from people who say there's not scientific evidence to support it. but that is such a rare thing. I mean, that's a very minority opinion in the US. Most people in the US, they really enjoy the narratives of health practices. And there's less criticism that there's not scientific evidence. So it's interesting that there's like a science. So it's actually, I view that as very favorable, that people are saying, hey, show me the evidence that this thing's actually legitimate. That's a positive thing. So it's a great invitation to do some studies. And so I view that not as negative at all. That's great. That's fantastic if that's a person's entry point to health and wellness.
Okay. Can I give you some context too?
Yeah.
Now, the thing is, when we speak about these concepts like yoga, Ayurveda, meditation, pranayam, these are ancient practices which are based on basically biohacking the human body through some small exercise-based changes or protocol-based changes or food-based changes. But because those words, yoga, Ayurveda, dhyan, which is meditation, pranayam, which is breathing exercises, they're associated with the Sanatan Dharma side. I think they get a bad rep from the other side. And of course, I'm Sanatani. So I'm speaking on behalf of this side, but I'm also trying to view it objectively. I'm trying to view it from the side that's against Sanatan Dharma, politically speaking.
Yeah.
So I feel like people are closed off. They're scientific and not scientific when it comes to these things. And my response is always that over the next 20 years, what I anticipate is that meditative practices and yoga will be researched upon very, very, very heavily. And then we're going to find linkages between, say, breathing exercises, aka pranayam, and your health of your lungs, the health of your skin, etc.
Yeah.
Correct way of thinking, or do you want to correct me? Like, what do you think of what I just said?
Yeah, it sounds like very typical thing between there's groups of humans who take sides, they entrench themselves in these thoughts, and they battle each other out. And I guess our approach has been very much neutral, where we don't care where the idea comes from. We don't care who the tribe is. We don't care the history of the tribe. We just care if it works. So it's entirely, do we have evidence, and can we bring it back to these biomarkers that we care about? So it sounds to me like that really is a tribal conversation more than it is a scientific pursuit.
Gotcha. Can I deep dive a little more into one of those?
Yeah.
Okay. So again, here's where there's actually no scientific evidence because it's difficult to study something like this. And this is related to your subject as well, which is the subject of longevity and immortality, according to some people. So we speak about longevity in yoga very heavily, but it's also mentioned that it's very, very difficult to go about. The basis of it is what yoga is about. So what the West knows as yoga, often the West will view yoga as a set of exercises.
Right.
Sanatanis view yoga as an entire lifestyle, where the first two steps are yam and niyams, which is rules and ethics. I'm roughly translating. The next step is asana, which is the physical part, which is what the West knows. Then there's pranayam, which is breathing exercises. There's dhyan, which is meditation. Now, what they say is that to go into deeper states of meditation, you need to work very heavily on your body, and you need to work very heavily on your breathing exercises. And that's when you can enter deeper states of meditation. Now, parallelly, when you grow up in India, you have access to very advanced yoga schools, very advanced meditation. So I'll speak about my own experience. I've been meditating for 5 years upon Hong Sau. And if my lifestyle is completely clean, if I'm sleeping well, if I don't have too much career stress, and I'm able to just focus on my meditation as my priority, I often have meditation sessions where I go so deep that I forget my name, I forget my gender, I forget my own sense of identity. And I just know that I'm some being that's in a state of meditation. I also know when to get out. Now, the thing is, when you're in that deeper place in your own head, you can hear your own heartbeat. And in the chapter that explains the Hong Sau meditation, they say that the whole purpose of Hong Sau is to reduce the number of breaths you're taking in every minute. And when you reduce the number of breaths, your heart beats extremely slowly. And in that state of slow breaths and a slow heartbeat, anti-aging takes place and cellular healing takes place. And you're basically able to help your long-term state of having a calm mind as well as your long-term life. I'd love to hear your thoughts on everything I said. Even if you believe that what I said is flaky, I'm open to that input.
Yeah. So I built a company over the past couple of years, a brain interface company. We were trying to build a globally mass market available brain interface, because getting your brain measured is very hard and costly. And the ones that are cheap just don't give you good quality. So we spent 7 years building basically wearable fMRI. It's just like you put a bike helmet on your head and it measures your brain. And we looked at meditation as one of the endpoints. So we'd bring people in and have them do meditations and then measure the efficacy of their meditation technique. And it was really fun because most people because meditation is something you explain to other people in words, once a person closes their eyes, your internal experience is not necessarily shareable with someone else. And so most people who go into meditation, they just sit there and they just ruminate on thoughts. And so 2 seconds later, they're off on a to-do list or what they're nervous about or what they're excited about. And they're and they catch themselves, bring it back, and then go. It just repeats that process, right? And then better meditators can have a longer pause between thoughts and calm that. So we actually could quantify a person's efficacy meditating. So it was no longer this esoteric, subjective thing. We could actually put a number to it and show data. And so we wanted to do, I wanted to do a tongue-in-cheek competition where you basically bring all the different communities of people who work in their various meditation techniques and then have them compete with their techniques in a quantified format to see both the individual and the technique. And so you basically just level set with numbers and you make an esoteric practice scientific and quantifiable. And so that's my approach of I really want to use science and data and try to get to the actual cause. Then if it has some kind of rejuvenation properties, I want to measure them. So if the idea is the heart rate goes low and the body enters some kind of state, I would want to do some kind of measurement to try to capture that measurement.
Would you put yourself through something like this?
Certainly. Yeah.
Is this on the cards?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, we've tried to hang out with power laws. It's when you look at the scientific evidence, there are thousands of things somebody can do to improve their health. But there's only 100 things we have time to do. And so we try to take the things that have the biggest lift on life extension and focus on those. So we would probably need a little bit of encouragement from the evidence that says, meditation has this kind of effect that leads to this kind of longevity, whatever. If it's not big enough, it wouldn't make our cut.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So
understood.
Yeah. So, but if it has big effect size for mental health, maybe so. So it's got to be worth the time for the potential benefit.
Gotcha. Do you turn to ancient wisdom to further the edges of science that you've reached?
No.
Why not? And or what would make you turn to ancient wisdom? And when I say ancient wisdom, I'm talking about cultures from all over the world, not just Indian culture.
Yeah.
The shamanic culture, Native Americans, etc.
I mean, so what we've done is we've said no culture, no methodology, no story gets priority. It's evidence. Scientific evidence is the only thing that gets priority. And then we quantify that with data in my body to see if it works. Now, that creates a blind spot for us because we don't have scientific evidence for all things like meditation. Meditation may be one of the most powerful things anybody can do for their health. And we have some evidence on it, but not as much as we'd like. And so we have a blind spot that there's all this potential goodness in the world and we don't see it because there's not been rigorous trials on it. So we realize that that's the case. But just like in this situation where we have limited resources, we can only try so many things, we accept that trade-off of having blind spots to having a rigorous process that is scientific.
Okay. The core of the reason why I have respect for you is because you're living your life from an evidence-based perspective and you're studying the data related to your body more than any other human being in human history ever has. So I hear what you say about evidence, but I asked you earlier about, hey, are you experimenting with your exercise protocols? Are you experimenting with your diet and or life protocols? How do you come up with the experiments that you're supposed to put your body through?
Yeah, we usually find a research paper. And like, for example, I shared today on social media that a power law biomarker is uric acid. So it's this inflammatory thing in the body. And my levels are in the top 1% optimal. If you have a high level of uric acid, your risk of death can be up to 250% increased. So it's a really big, like you don't want a high level of uric acid. And for example, things that potentially increase uric acid are foods high in purines. So like meat, for example, shellfish, alcohol. Like these things will increase uric acid. So we chose that biomarker because it has a huge effect on mortality. So we're trying to basically say like what things predict death? And then if you can identify those things that predict death, how do you make those things optimal?
Gotcha.
And so, yeah, so the basic things like, cardiovascular health, brain health, inflammation. So we've tried to take the best science and say, how do you make those markers ideal? Which is what I was saying, that if you look at my biomarkers, I arguably have better biomarkers than anyone in the world,
right,
across the board. And keep in mind, I've only been doing this for 3 years. And I was destroying my health before this. So it really should be encouraging for everyone, even if you don't have a lot of money, that you can do basic things for your health and your body is extremely responsive. So I think I view this as like great news for everyone.
Gotcha. So what I've understood is that because you've broken down the body into multiple parts, there's just so much studying and so much research to do that you can't turn to every subject from all over the world and all the conjecture from all over the world and put your body through it because time is limited.
Exactly.
But if someone were to offer you a research-based paper, a scientific paper, based on some concept of ancient wisdom, but then the scientific paper points towards something useful for longevity.
Yeah.
Would you be open to like trying it?
Absolutely. Okay. We're so open. And I have people who reach out to me every day and they'll say, I'm going to beat you. And they're expecting me to be mad. And I say, great, let me help you.
Right.
Like I want people to take what I've done and better it. I want them to beat me. Like that's the whole purpose of this thing, is to level everyone up. And so, yes, and so if people are trying to replicate what I've done, amazing. That's the goal. If they have better ideas, even better.
Okay. Perhaps 10 years on, when I'm carrying out research about all these things, you're going to be the first receiver of those research papers.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. And your journey is going to be the same and much more enhanced 10 years on, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. There's another burning question that the audience has for you. I'm just going straight for it.
Yeah.
Your talks often begin with speaking about erections and testosterone.
Yeah.
Is semen retention, and you're familiar with the whole NoFap movement and all that, right?
Yeah.
Is that something you have experimented with? And or how do you look at sexuality as a chapter within the larger chapter that we call longevity?
Yeah. We looked at semen retention, and if I remember correctly, there was a short spike of testosterone like day 3 or 4.
Yes.
And then it came back to renormalization, but there was no long-term benefit. So I think that's the case. We just dipped our toe into the topic. Basically, we did enough research to say it doesn't seem like there's anything here that we can see. Maybe interesting short-term data, but like nothing meaningful. So it just didn't make our cut for the research.
Okay. Is sexuality a factor that's being measured? Any aspect of sexuality?
Yeah, I mean, so like I mentioned before that we reduced my thymus age by 7 years, right? That's probably one of our biggest accomplishments.
Gotcha.
No one cares, right? No one knows what the thymus is. No one cares if your thymus is old or young, right? The only thing you care about, so what people care about is boners. Right? So I was basically like, as a team, we were having this conversation one day. So it was all by accident. I was doing this therapy and I was sitting on this device, electromagnetic stimulation. So like I use it on my abdomen to build muscles, and I did this, and I started having, every time I'd wake up, I was erect. So I spoke to my team. I was like, you guys, what is going on? Like, why am I having so many nighttime erections? And so we started poking around the literature. We're like, actually, nighttime erections are like a really important health marker. It's not just like some funny topic. It's not something we just like laugh at. It actually is a really important biomarker because men who do not have nighttime erections are 70% more likely to die prematurely. It predicts death. And so I said to my team, like, okay, then what would it take for me to have the most measured penis in the world? What do we do? Like, how do you measure a penis? And so then I did this whole battery of tests. Like I did ultrasound on the penis and looked at blood flow. I did even things like I did urination speed, like how fast can you go to the bathroom? So you actually see a graph of like your max urination speed. I did, we did, all sorts of measurements. And then we found this one device that did nighttime erections. And so on average, a 20-year-old male should have between 3 and 5 erection episodes per night and have around 145 minutes of erections. And that's healthy. But then by the time you're 75, that reduces to about 50 minutes. So it dramatically declines with age. And so I measured my baseline and I was something like 130 minutes, something like that. But it was like roughly where my age was at. And then we did 2 therapies. So we then went out and we said, okay, is there scientific evidence that we can look at that increases penis health? And we found 2. One was focused shockwave therapy. So it's a technology used for when people, for example, tear an ACL or a knee and they're rebuilding that joint. Then we also got Botox. So I had those 2 therapies, focused shockwave therapy and Botox. And it increased my nighttime erections to the length of Titanic, the movie, 3 hours and 8 minutes. And so my nighttime erections are better than the average 18-year-old. And so it's basically like what that did is, it's a funny topic, right? It's like controversial, it's sensitive. But what it did is it actually explained my entire endeavor in one example.
Gotcha.
You can measure the age of a certain biological function. You can use scientific evidence to change that, like either reverse the age or slow down the speed of aging. And it did it with a topic people understand, boners. And so it's just really effective to convey that science and data are really helpful. And that also, this goes into like deep psyche, like what does it mean to be a man? What does it mean to be fertile? What does it mean to take care of your health? And what does it mean when you're not taking care of your health? Like when you're not sleeping well, your nighttime erections will vanish. So it kind of goes back to, it shows that like manliness is health, right? Masculinity is health. And you can't skip on health and still be manually masculine.
Right.
Now, women also have nighttime erections. So they're just harder to measure, but they too have the same episodes. So it's males and females. So it was really successful in explaining the entire topic. And also I think kind of an encouragement, like it's something your friends can be like, you having boners, man?
Right.
You're vaping a lot. You're not sleeping well. You're eating junk food. Is anything going on down there, right? Like, so it's kind of like this easy conversational topic of you can now talk about it in a way where it encourages healthy practices.
It's bro to bro longevity talk.
Right? I'm like, hey bro, like how your boners? Yeah, tell me.
Yeah. I see a lot of libido related problems with guys my age.
Yes. It's a big deal. I mean, I'm so happy we did this because I always wonder, like, are we going too far? Like it just seems like it's a really important topic. No one's talking about it. And it's like, it's pretty scary for a man.
Do you think masturbating is good for health?
I know the data we've looked at, there is benefit for ejaculation, right? For having orgasms, as it relates to prostate health and other things. So I think, being sexually active is generally a healthy thing.
As you're doing all this longevity stuff, and I'm talking about the whole body,
do
you feel your libido going up as well? You do?
Yeah, like when I was building my companies in that 14-year, like I had no sex drive. It was gone. I wasn't sleeping well. I was overweight. I was eating bad foods. Just like sex was the last thing in the entire world I was interested in.
Gotcha. There's a word called centenarian, right?
Yes.
It means people in the hundreds.
Yes.
Do you study people in the hundreds now for the sake of the work that you're doing in 2024?
we really don't spend much time because they're mostly genetic anomalies.
Okay.
Yeah. Like this is the thing, like when you interview the person who supposedly is 113 and the reporter's like, what do you do? They're like, well, a glass of whiskey and 2 cigarettes every day. And then other people are like, I knew it. I knew that was the case, that, that it's whiskey and alcohol. But it's really, that's not a good way to go about it. Like you should not be asking the person what they, like you could survey, but you should really look at the genome and like other things. So, for example, I created this leaderboard called the rejuvenationolympics.com. So it's for speed of aging. And so there's a clock inside your body, just like tree rings, and it reveals how fast you're aging. And so it's such a cool test because it's just one number.
Is it the DNA strands shortening?
That's telomeres. So that's a different one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
But basically, we have this leaderboard. And so now it's a global competition. There's about 30,000 people participating. And so anytime you create a competition and give numbers, like humans kind of go crazy, right? So
how do you take the data?
It's just a blood spot. Like you prick your finger, put a blood spot, very easy.
Gotcha.
Yeah, you should do one. Actually, I should have brought one today for you.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Yeah, cool. So I'll get you one. And so I met the other day. So I think I'm like number 5 or 6 on the leaderboard, thereabouts. So I met the guy that's like number 2. He's a biochemist. And so I was like, okay, so what do you do for your health? And guess what the answer is?
Nothing.
Nothing. He's like, I don't know, like try to eat healthy and like I try to get good sleep. Like it was like nothing outside of normal cultural things. And so what's cool about this is we're seeing how genes are a significant input, right? Whereas me, like I'm doing all this stuff and he's barely beating me. And so it's just like, but it's like, we know this happens in life. Some people, despite their health habits, are healthy.
Warren Buffett.
Yeah, like they keep on living. Where others, that if they're even those who are very healthy, die of surprise heart attacks. So there's so many variables that are the inputs to these things, and we're getting better at detecting them. So it's really cool, I think, for people to understand that we all got our genetic cards dealt to us, and we can do some things, but not solve all things. And so it's just a reconciliation of life that's okay, but it's important to know what we can do and what we can't do.
I don't know how one would quantify this. And I hope that in the coming 20, 30 years, we're able to quantify this. But I have a theory that emotions play a big role in like this whole process.
Yeah.
That biochemist who is number 2 on the list, I'd love to know what his emotional state of mind is.
Yeah. So you're correct. Stress plays a significant role in speed of aging, which is why, like, I'll just say I'm really proud of myself for being among the very top, because my life is extremely stressful. Like I'm building 5 companies. That is hard. Like I'm sure, right? When you're really racing at life, it's hard. Like inevitably, you just have all kinds of fires and all kinds of drama, and like everything's difficult. There's never enough time in the day. And so I'm building 5 companies, and I'm among the very best in the world at like basically my body's biological capacity. So it's cool because I say this because most entrepreneurs and most people grinding in life believe they have to martyr their health in exchange for success. And it's so strongly held that they basically hold themselves in a prison because they think that's the only way, and they feel like there's a sense of shame if they basically take care of their health and if their peers see them. Like you want to be seen as like not needing more than 3 hours of sleep at night, or you want the story told about you that you stayed up 2 nights in a row writing furiously or coding or doing something. And it's such a destructive cultural meme, and I really want to just tear it down and give everyone who's listening the reassurance you can be epic and make your health your number 1 priority.
Yeah. I think that's what people who've only heard your name don't know about you, that you are currently building tech companies as well with teams. Also, to give the audience context, this podcast was decided in a pretty impromptu fashion. And I'm sure you have like 1,000 other things to do, but you were actually able to make time for this podcast in Singapore. right? While
Yes.
you're traveling. And I'm sure you're accounting for all the practices that you go about as well.
Yes.
So it says a lot about how high a priority your longevity stuff is, as well as who you are as a person to be able to handle all that, man. Again, like I think we're going to meet again in life. And at that point, I'd love to kind of break down your psychology even further because I feel I've only broken down about 5% of who you are as a person in this episode. This is kind of like an introduction about you to the Indian audiences, Brian. Before we let you go, I have one last section for you, one last question, which is related to genetic engineering. We had Fab on the show 2 days ago, and he spoke about how he injected his muscles with follistatin, and that stopped the degradation of muscle mass. So he wasn't working out, but his muscles weren't degrading. And that's like one level of genetic engineering. But CRISPR as a technology is evolving as well, where you literally be able to, for lack of better words to describe it, you'll be able to make designer babies after a point by altering genetics.
Yes.
Based on whatever I've read about CRISPR and designer babies, I think it's fairly easy to do some kind of genetic engineering on an infant or a child that's growing up. But I don't know how difficult it is to do the same kind of genetic engineering on a fully grown adult. So what have you figured about genetic engineering at this point, and what are you figuring about it going forward?
Yeah. So it's that follistatin gene therapy I got as well. It actually doesn't modify the genome. It just allows for increased production of follistatin. So it's labeled as a gene therapy, but it's really at the layer of increased expression of this protein.
Gotcha.
So you're not actually like changing the genome. The other technologies, there's been a few advances even in the past few months that make it even better than CRISPR. So it's coming. It's inevitable. We're going to figure it out. It's not clear when it's going to be at market. Like, of course, people are already doing embryo selection. Like, we're already starting to play with this. Like, don't die is starting before conception, right? Which is wild. Like, and so someone in their 20s, they may begin a health journey, and their friends may be like, "Why are you doing that, man? Like, you're 20 years old," but they're almost late to the party. Because now it's happening before conception, right? So my son is 19. He started doing Blueprint with me when he was 16. So it's just going to start earlier and earlier. And I'm guessing that cultural norms are going to change so that our entire society is optimizing for a reduced speed of aging and prevention of aging damage. It'll just be the norm. Like, everyone's going to do it. And so like this whole idea of debauchery and like this slow boil suicide that we do with like calling drinking with friends fun or like missing night, like the way you want to live life, all of it's just going to go away. I think culturally that will be viewed as lowbrow. It would it will be looked down upon.
I agree.
And it will be much more celebrated if you actually honor your conscious existence with this level of respect. That why would anyone do anything that would cause disease or increased rate of aging? And so I think that genetics will also, there'll be a push for that as well. It will help us do that. But I just think that we are going to have a massive shift as a species. It's going to happen faster than anyone thinks is possible. And it's going to move towards this deep respect and appreciation for existence.
In terms of time, how far are we from people actually altering their genetic profile a little bit?
It's no longer possible for any human on this planet to say anything intelligent about the future. That is like the most interesting concept in the world, is that we have always been the primary form of intelligence, and we can model things out and make these probabilities on what will happen and when. Even if we're a little bit wrong, we still are this form of intelligence where we can create these probabilities. Now that we're developing AI and it's moving at such a fast pace, our ability to predict is almost zero. And so just simply, when I went to college, I could say I'm going to study a certain thing and have a certain profession, and then I'm going to work until I retire. I could plan out my entire lifetime. My son just finished his first year at school. He was doing math and physics. he has no clue what to study. And he has no idea if he should go to school or not. And there's no human on this planet that can give him advice on what to do. Should he study humanities? Should it be math? Should it be CS? Should he drop out of school? Nobody knows. So in one generation, you could plan out your entire life, and this generation can't plan a year in advance. And that is true across society. We cannot see directly in front of us. So any prediction anyone makes is entirely made up. All right, like you can try to model these things up, but you're basically introducing AI as a new change agent where it's more capable than it ever has been. So all of our predictions are wrong.
You know, this whole narrative about humans and AI working together will be the most powerful combination. I have a theory that I don't know how this will go about, and you'd probably have more of an insight on this. But I think some kind of an AI-based software is going to be used by the world of science to heavily advance science. And any advancement in the world of science is usually translated into an advancement in engineering about 50 years later. But I think those engineers will also work with another AI software to make that no science to engineering transition within 5 years at some point.
Yeah. I mean, it's basically, I think it's reasonable to say the 2030s will make the 2020s look like the third century. I think it's at that speed. If you just simply look at the math of how fast AI is moving, we don't know the specifics of how to predict things. We can just say, absent any kind of catastrophic event that changes, that like annihilates us, we're probably going to improve at some speed, and that speed is going to compound upon itself in some kind of, maybe not even an exponential, just like a pretty swift curve. It's just going to change everything. And this is what Don't Die is about. I basically am proposing, in this moment when we're giving birth to superintelligence, no existing form of human thought or human societal organization is equal to answer the questions in this moment. Not capitalism, not democracy, no religion, no construction of human thought is actually equal to this moment. Don't Die is the only ideological system that is equal. And so we don't have time for this today, but Don't Die is a political system, it's economics, it's a social system, it's morals, it's ethics. So I host these Don't Die gatherings. It's a 2-hour long conversation, and we work through these ideas, and you'll come out on the other end understanding it. Until then, it's very hard to fully understand what it means. But basically what I'm saying is, this is the new game every human on this planet is going to play. This is the thing that allows us to give birth to AI and not kill each other.
I hear you, Brian. This was an honor because I genuinely believe that you're at that brink of actually creating a practical change in human society. And I don't know how many human beings in the current world population can say that from a societal perspective, from a macro perspective, from a millennium long perspective. So I wish you more luck, man. I know that existence is your God. I've not been able to exactly define what my God is other than the word divinity. So I pray to that divinity that you get to your purpose even faster than you expect, man. So thank you for giving me your time. This is not the last conversation that we're ever having. I want to get to know your heart and your soul much more deeply, but I salute what you're doing.
Thank you,
I salute
friend.
your mission.
I appreciate you.
So thank you for your time, your presence, and thank you for being on India's biggest podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks, man. That was the episode for today, ladies and gentlemen. This is one of my favorite subjects, breaking down the different aspects of health. In the description box below, we're going to link some of our health podcasts that we've covered on this channel. We'll also be linking Brian's social media handles. In the outros of my podcast, I always intend on speaking about how I felt about the guest post the episode being shot. What I felt about Brian is that he's someone who has those blinders on. He can only see his final goal of trying to figure out the mystery called immortality and longevity. That's what inspired me. I often think to myself that perhaps my 40s will primarily be about meditation and my own spiritual chase. But when you meet people like this who are chasing such an important human mission with so much aggression, that's what inspires you. And that's the inspiration that I was left with. So please support Bryan, follow him on all his social media platforms, and keep listening into TRS. Lots of biohacking and longevity themed episodes are coming your way in the coming months. Thank you for listening in.